specified in the infrastructure. Oh, let me consent to recording. All right. So we're building out our plan and engagement plan to create our state's digital equity plan as part of the infrastructure bill. So the first step with that, is providing comments to the NTIA, which we're working on both as part of the broadband office, but then also through the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Then we will use the subcommittee's working groups to start to make headway on the components of the digital equity plan that are named in that federal infrastructure bill. So if you are interested in getting involved or want to have a one-on-one, I'll drop a link to a form where you can set up that time with me, and we can make sure that you're engaged in the way you would like to be for the digital equity components. So happy to clarify that very vague overview, but really we're just in the beginning stages and using the foundation of the work that the subcommittee has already done to gather data that's available related to digital equity statistics, identifying gaps and working towards some of the policy recommendations we had there that could be addressed in our digital equity plan. One other, on a separate note, but related to the overall issue of digital equity, is that as part of the governor's budget proposals for workforce, he's included, a request, a proposal to fund digital navigators. And so we are working with Senator Coleman and Representative McLaughlin to draft a bill that includes investments in digital navigators to be placed across the state. So if you're not familiar with the digital navigator model, it's been promoted by a few different organizations, including Digital Us and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And what it does is it provides, sort of boots on the ground in trusted communities, trusted community partner organizations to connect people who are digitally disconnected. So connects them to low-cost internet resources, helps provide sort of point-in-time training for devices or for new resources, and then also gathers data for us at the state level to understand where additional investments might be made. So if you're interested in being part of the stakeholder conversations for that bill, we'll be scheduling those in the next couple of weeks. We just got our first bill draft for this workforce package. And so we're excited to have that conversation and see that investment for digital navigators. And then lastly, I may have mentioned this on a previous update, but we are going to be posting a job description for a digital equity program manager in the Office of Future of Work that's funded as part of some of the workforce investments from the American Rescue Plan. And so I'll be sure to share that with Sarah to send out to this group so we can get some good applicants for that position. So very quick high-level overview, but just wanted to remind everyone that we have a lot of activities taking place related to digital literacy and inclusion, and really the components of digital equity outside of that broadband infrastructure. So if you'd like to be more involved, please don't hesitate to reach out or submit a response to one of these forms that I'll drop in the chat, because we'd love to have you at the table. Happy to answer any questions too, if there are those.
Do we have any questions from the board? Seeing none. All right. Thank you, Catherine. Happy New Year. All right, moving right along. 30 minutes set aside on CPF or CPF funding. And Kate Sneed, I saw her earlier, so.
Good morning. Thank you,
Morning.
Bob. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Oh, sweet. Thanks, Sarah. All right. So I am going to give some bunch of updates on federal stuff from the Economic Recovery Officer's standpoint. So Sarah, next slide, please. So quickly, I'm just going to go over some things from updates from myself, review of all the different funding streams we have coming in. The final Treasury rules came out last week, so I'm going to do a quick overview of those, some updates on SLFRF and 1289, capital project funds, and then infrastructure. Next slide, please. So just a few things to clarify and highlight some of the important work that I'm really taking on under this new role. A huge area is around collaboration with local government and municipality on broadband plans. So we all know that the local governments received received funding and can have the opportunity to use it for broadband issues. We also think, Bob has a ton of infrastructure uses in CDOT and in ways that we can partner with local municipalities, et cetera. So just a kind of more an FYI, and also just please, if you know local governments that are thinking about using some of their funding for broadband, connecting them with us just so that we can ensure that we're not duplicating efforts or potentially thinking about using capital project funds for an area of the state that is also, that a local government is thinking of using money for. The DOLA had an announcement in their newsletter. CCI and CML have all had announcements. So hopefully people are aware, and Sarah and I and some of you on this call, depending on what the conversation's been around CDOT and DOLA, have been involved in a lot around just, broadband plans and what different areas of the state are thinking of. So let's keep those happening, as it's been a really good, I think, role in making sure that we're coordinated and making sure that local governments understand how they access CDOT fiber and things like that. So that's one area. Another huge area that I've been spending a lot of time on is around eligible uses of the ARPA funding, especially now with the final rule coming out. So all of the funding that we are going to be giving out from both like House Bill 1289 last year, in addition to the capital project funds, have a lot of federal compliance and monitoring that must go along with them. So developing a lot of processes and procedures for that. If you are not aware, there is a required grant agreement that we as state agencies must be using when we give out this money. It's posted, the link is here, and I can share this presentation with you. I can also put that link maybe in the chat. But this is a public document, it's out there. Anyone who receives any of our funding through any of the ARPA legislation will be required to use this grant agreement as our contract between the state and then whoever the entity is. Additionally, using all of that to help come up with some eligibility checklists, because we've got state law and then we've got federal law and lots of different kind of competing things to figure out around how we can and cannot fund different projects. Capital project funds planning. So Sarah and I did 2 listening sessions. We're going to be doing some more listening sessions that I'll talk about in a little bit. The state also requires spend plans for all funding that we're receiving from the feds, and the governor directly signs off on these spend plans. So Sarah mainly, but I'm assisting and providing comment on this really around the metrics and the compliance aspect of how the state will be spending the funding that we get from the federal government. And then now it is become the state has figured out that and determined that my role is not only just for ARPA, but will also be for IIJA. So the original plan was these were for recovery dollars, but now it is for recovery and all infrastructure. So still in pretty early stages of analysis for the IIJA stuff specific to broadband, but attending a lot of webinars, working with Sarah in the CBO office for requests for comments from NTIA and different entities. And then I'm working with the governor's office. They've hired a consulting firm to come in and help do some estimating of funding in the different categories in IIJ. A lot of it is formula based, and so trying to kind of estimate what's coming into the state, what we potentially will need for match, and things like that. So that's, if you ever have questions in any of those areas, that's pretty much the chunk of what I've been focusing on in the last couple of months. Next slide, please, Sarah. Again, quick review under ARPA. and I've cut my presentation or slides down to strictly the direct to agencies, or the things that we as a state are directly eligible to apply for. There's a lot of NTIA and other programs, but for just simplicity, I'm keeping it at what we as a state are getting, or what we can apply for as a state. So again, under ARPA, the direct to agencies, non-competitive grants, there's a, direct to the state was close to $3 billion. We got 75 million last year in state local fiscal recovery funds. There's potential to get more this year. I have yet to see any bills come out of the bill drafts, I should say, come out of the economic recovery task force, but I know those will be coming from the legislator soon. And then of course the capital project funds, which I'll talk about here in a second. As far as the IIJA, again, there's probably 15 plus breakouts within that one piece of law, but the things I've picked out here are the ones that are direct to agency, non-competitive grants. So the biggest one is the Bead Program. We know we will get at least 100 million, because that was kind of like every state will get 100 million. As I was saying, the governor's office has hired a consulting firm, and we're working with them to analyze the formula and things that will, to try and kind of predict or estimate how much money we will get. That is tricky because so much of that is based on the FCC maps, which we are not out yet. And I was speaking with someone in the federal delegation on Friday last week, and I didn't realize, I guess there was the FCC had out a request for proposal for a contracting company to come in and help do those maps, and there's been some kind of a conflict of interest or a challenge to the contractor that was picked, so there's been an extra delay in that process. So again, at least 100 million. We're estimating, like very roughly right now, anywhere between 100 to 500 million, and that would be direct money that comes to us at the state, comes to the governor, comes to the most likely the Colorado Broadband office, and then we are in charge of granting out that based on all of the IIJA requirements. There's also a formula grant for the Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program, which Catherine was just mentioning. So there's two parts of this. One is a non-competitive grant. Each state is just given a chunk of money based on a formula around population. And that comes to us and is for more about building the capacity, developing the plan, what do we need as a state. And then the three that I'd like to highlight are competitive grants that we as a state, in addition to tribes, in addition to providers, local governments, will all be eligible to apply for. One is around middle mile funding. One is the other one is around the digital equity program. So once we as a state have a plan around digital equity, then different localities, nonprofits, government, et cetera, can apply to actually help us carry out that plan. So that's a competitive grant. We as a state can also apply. And then another one I wanted to just highlight is the USDA Reconnect got a bunch more funding. And again, historically the state has never applied for these kinds of grants. We are as a state eligible to apply, but as are local governments, tribal entities, providers, etc. So for right now, I'm really just focusing on this direct to agency funding and the stuff that we will be receiving as a state. As the new executive director comes on in the Colorado Broadband office and develops a long-term strategy, I'm sure she will be reviewing all of this and determining if anyone if they want to apply for these as a state, etc. Next slide. So it wasn't last week, it was now 2 weeks ago, the 6th of January, the US Treasury released their final rules for the state local fiscal recovery funds. Again, that governs or oversees what we as the state can use those funds for. Quick review of some changes that I wanted to point out in reviewing it. So in these columns, you'll see what the interim rule said, what the final rule said, and then I kind of highlighted in the last column the significant changes. So one is that an eligible use of funding was for previously was just for internet access programs, so providing basically subsidies for people to get onto the internet. The final rule broadened that to include devices and equipment and not just service. So if you needed to, if we chose to use some of the money to provide stipends to families to purchase computers or purchase hotspots or things like that, it broadened that use. Under another category of eligible use is broadband infrastructure. In the interim rule, it defined providing service to unserved or unserved households or businesses. It has now changed the way that the service, it needs to be provided to households and businesses with an identified need for additional broadband infrastructure, which would include but is not limited to a lack of broadband service reliably delivering certain speeds. So it in a sense removes the definition of unserved as the eligibility category and broadens it to really about providing service to households who have a need. We have to, as the state, have very clear documentation and evidence of that need. Examples of that are lack of access to reliable high-speed broadband connection, lack of affordable broadband, and lack of reliable service. So while this really broadened our ways we can use this, it also has put a lot more onus, I would say, on us as a state to make sure that in giving out this money, we are clearly requiring grantees and everyone to document all of these things. So it's not just the maps or the data that says they don't receive 25.3. Yes, we can still use that as a form of demonstration of need. However, we can go outside of that. So we can get, if it's not reliable, if we can provide documentation, gather enough data to show that it's not reliable service, then that is an example of need, not just about 25.3. And some of the comments from Treasury are really around working with communities to figure out what they feel is the need in their community, and not being so set on the 25.3 definition. So that's one of the bigger changes. Also, just it clarifies that modernization of hardware and software for cybersecurity can be included in these broadband infrastructure grants. So if there was a need for additional equipment to be purchased in order to ensure cybersecurity, that's allowed. Next slide, please. Another thing, so there was no change to the rule around speed. So again, it has to, upon completion, it has to be designed to reliably meet or exceed 100 megabytes symmetrical. We are looking and trying to find out from them what they mean by scalable. So the other aspect that's not on here is that if it's not feasible due to cost, geography, topography, that it has to be 100 down, 20 up and scalable. And we're trying to get clarification on how the feds want to justify scalable. We're thinking it's probably just going to be around engineering plans, etc. But just an FYI that those are two outstanding things we're kind of trying to get clarity on. Another large change is around affordability. So the interim rule was completely silent on affordability as a requirement. It was just listed as a priority to prioritize grant recipients who had affordability plan. The final rule now requires that the provider is enrolled in the FCC affordable connectivity program, which was the which I'll go over. No, I guess I don't go over it later, but it was the kind of codification of the emergency broadband benefit program that came out of COVID. And so they need to be either the provider has to use that federal program and provide discounted service, or have a similar low cost option offered without data usage caps and speeds that are sufficient for a household to simultaneously telework and engage in remote learning. The other thing is that recipients will be required to report speed pricing and any data allowance information as part of the mandatory reporting to Treasury. So we will require that as the state, in addition to be able to pass it through. Next slide, please. So then just a couple of other areas that were highlighted is around prioritizations of the funding. So we should provide to service locations not currently served by a wireline connection that reliably delivers at least 100 down, 20 up. Investments in fiber optic infrastructure. It prioritizes last mile connection by either focusing directly on funding last mile projects, or that in middle mile projects have commitments in place to support new or improved last mile service. Greg knows, but Greg and I are working on how to ensure that the money that went out of 1289 to DOLA, how we can ensure that to make sure that we're fulfilling this federal requirement. And then also for support for local networks owned, operated, affiliated with local governments, nonprofits and cooperatives, which is language that is very similar in the capital project funding guidance as well. So hopefully we can develop a smooth process that we can use for all of these different funding sources to help us with grant requirements. So that's my update on the final rules from US Treasury. Sarah, will you go to the next slide, please? Couple updates on just the money that was set aside in the 1289 last year. I know hopefully in this week or next, we'll finalize the contracts with the tribal nations and get the money, be able to execute those contracts with them. We've been working really closely, Ed Mills and I and Sarah have been working closely with them. I know they're presenting to you all later today as well. We are working with OEHI still on a grant application and review process. My goal, if we can make it happen, is to have that grant application open this month. Looking to do a 45-day grant application for that, so that the rural health facilities have the time necessary to complete those applications. The $5 million stipend program that was created in that funding source, we're actually kind of in a little bit of a hold on that. We're trying to get some more legal guidance on the overlap with the emergency broadband, which now becomes the ACP program. When infrastructure was passed and it codified that, and we were doing a lot of work throughout the state trying to figure out how we could implement a one-time program that only has $5 million in it. It became clear that there was potential that if we had a program, then it would make people ineligible for other programs and ineligible at the federal level and different things. And that's not our intent. It's also, the $5 million is just a one-time funding, where the federal program is, an ongoing program. So we're working to get legal guidance and some help on that. One thought is to kind of pilot a program similar to what Catherine was talking about from the legislation she's working on, to work with a nonprofit that's already very connected in the community and hire some kind of caseworker type people who could be out in the community helping people directly enroll in the affordability program. So it would be very specific to helping people enroll in the emergency broadband benefit, which is now the ACP. So hoping to have some clarity on that soon. The broadband fund last mile winter grant cycle application window just closed, and I believe their next meeting is scheduled for February 8th. We are looking at some potential statutory change to 1289 around the broadband fund because there's some conflicts between the high cost support mechanism requirements and the federal treasury requirements. And so there might need to be some changes there. And then, as I said, I'm working, DOLA has received their applications, they're under review, and I'm working with them to ensure that we're meeting the eligible uses and can also get those applicants some funding. Big picture with all of that, there's some stuff moving. The biggest other thing is the deadline for all of this is supposed to be June of 2022, which is less than 6 months away now, and there's pretty much no way we can grant this, but we cannot spend all the money by then, just because of the way the grants work in the state. They're reimbursement based. So we're working with the gov's office, the legislator, et cetera, to get that postponed to meet federal timelines as well. Next slide, please. I'm getting close, I promise. I know this is a lot. Capital project funds. So we have applied through the US Treasury. We've gotten acknowledgement. They've accepted that. We are literally just in the holding pattern waiting for the US Treasury to send us our grant agreement, which then will also open up the money. I think, Sarah, it's probably been a month now that every week they say, yeah, we're hoping to get it to you this week, and nothing. So we're in a, I wouldn't say we're in a standstill, because we're working on stuff internally and to get that. But Sarah, I know, is working on a lot of RFPs around some different things that we can hire to help us do some planning and figuring out how to best use the capital project funds. Obviously, Sarah and I are doing the listening sessions. And in fact, why don't you go to the next slide for me, please, Sarah? So we already did the 2 listening sessions, which Sarah shared about. We're going to be doing 4 more regional listening sessions. We will have the links on the websites, on the CBO website here soon. We just finalized these this morning. But these will be the dates and times, and we're trying to break them up into regions and really work in the regions to best understand. These will be different than the previous listening sessions that were kind of targeted more to providers and potential grant applicants. You all are welcome to these listening sessions, but the questions on these will be a little bit more focused on, what are the needs of the people in Southern Colorado? What are the needs of people in the Western Slope? We're partnering with both Hickenlooper and Bennett's office to advertise these. Hickenlooper and Bennett were both very involved in the passing of the IIJA and are invested in, making sure that the needs of their communities are met, and did a lot of research leading up to all the different federal legislation. So they're working with us. Again, links to these will be on the website soon, but there will be listening sessions on these dates and times. All right, next slide. This is my last slide. This is not new. This is the same as last time. I haven't really changed it much, just because we're still, waiting. I have attended a couple of webinars on the Bead program through IIJA and the NTIA. They will be getting out a NOFO hopefully in May is what they're thinking, but until then, it's just, there's some listening sessions, there's the comment period, which Sarah and I are working on, and there's a lot of thought around how do we use CPF and IIJA together and wisely. And then again, the digital equity and the middle mile aspects of that legislation, those I have not heard. There has not been as much activity from the NTA on those programs specifically. So I don't have too many updates, but I am trying to be pretty tapped in. Sarah's as well. So as we learn more about those programs, I will make sure that you are aware of those. And that is all I have. So happy to answer questions. This presentation is available to you. I put some of the links in the chat just for immediate access, but please feel free to reach out, and as we keep going through all the federal stuff, I will let you know of updates.
Thank you, Kate. Do we have any questions from the board of directors? Seeing none. Any other questions out there? I'll ask the general public if there's any questions. Okay. Yeah, Craig.
Hey, Kate, do you know if the formula-based methods are going to use the 2020 census or the 2010 for locations and POPs?
Great, great question. I do not know that, but I will add it to my list to, I'm assuming 2020, but that's an assumption. So I will do some more research and see if I can figure it out.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Kate. Any other questions?
Actually, yes, if you can hear me. This is Richard Holt with Centennial. The listening tour, I'm curious, can you only be a part of the region to be a part of the listening tour, or actually can you listen in on these listening tours? Regardless of region.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we really want to make sure that we're highlighting the people who live in that region and really understanding their needs. So I would say feel free to listen and join, but if you're not directly in that region or impacted, then we would prefer that you try to limit your comment just so we can hear from everyone. But they're not going to be restricted. I mean, we're not going to say, oh, your zip code's not in that area. Like, that's too much work for me. But so yeah, feel free to join them, and we just ask that you're respectful of the making sure the people in the region have time to participate and provide comment.
Absolutely understandable. Thank you, Kate.
And Richard, just to provide a little bit extra there, the listening tours are not an area where Kate and I are giving a bunch of information. This is us asking questions of people. So if you want more information about what's happening or you want to stay up to date, the best way to do it is to either join the newsletter and join Kate's stakeholder group.
Okay.
And I was just going to say, I just put in the chat, my next stakeholder update is this Friday. A lot of what I just went over will be similar to what I go over on Friday, but feel free to send that link out or use that link on Friday.
Fair enough. Greatly appreciated.
And Bob, there's a question in chat.
Yeah, I think I saw that. Kate, do you need us to read that?
Yeah, so I think, Amy, you're talking about the Affordable Connectivity Program through the federal government. They have not released, so far it's just, they've opened the application. I have not completed it myself per se, because I'm not a provider, so I can't go on and do it. But I would hope that the feds would take into consideration. I think one thing that Sarah and I have thought about too is as we learn more about that program, maybe the state can be a conduit to help providers in small areas apply to become that. I think it's clear the feds want everyone to be participating, because from here moving forward, if they are not, if they don't have proof and don't show that they're registered in that program, then we as a state can't give them funding either for any of the federal funding. So it's definitely something that they are going to need to figure out. And right now we have no solution, but it's something that Sarah and I have talked about as a potential for future in the future.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Richard and Kate. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we're going to move right along to Mr. Mills. It looks like we have so many acronyms today, so bear with me. I'm assuming that's the Southern Ute and the Ute Mountain Utes. You want to give us an update on?
That is correct. Southern Ute Indian Tribe is going to go first. And so Jeff Ingman, if you could go ahead and get your presentation ready. My name is Ed Mills, and I am a tribal liaison with the Colorado Broadband Office. And it's been my privilege over the last 8 years to work in various capacities with both the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. Today, we have prepared about 10 to 15 minutes each for them to talk about their broadband projects and how they're working in the local regions to bring about broadband. So Jeff, are you ready to go?
I am, Ed, and if you don't mind, I'll share my screen because I'm going to jump around a little bit.
Please, and let me just tell you that Jeff Ingman is Chief Information Officer for the Southern Ute Indian Tribe Shared Services, and he's been there since April 2021, and I've really enjoyed working with Jeff. And so Jeff, I will let you take it away.
All right, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, so yeah, Jeff Ingman, thanks, Ed. I'm here with Delbert Cuthair and Leah Cleve. Delbert's project manager working on our broadband modernization project, and then Leah is my business operations manager in our shared services group, and she works a lot on our financial aspects, our grant applications, got a pretty heavy hand in those areas as well. So what am I going to go through? So you said I got about 10 to 15, Ed?
Yeah. I think we have 30 minutes set aside.
Some
Sorry,
highlights.
So let's go ahead and let's clarify that. I was told 10 to 15, Sarah.
So you have 20 minutes for a presentation and then 10 minutes for questions.
So there you go, Jeff.
Thank
You
you.
have 30 minutes.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of this little header on the top here. I'm not a Zoom aficionado. All right, so what I'll do is I'll just drive through a few slides here. And then Leah and Delbert, feel free to chime in if I miss anything. But so project drivers, they're kind of like the rest of us. You know, COVID-19 did really highlight the digital divide. People not having internet access at their homes, having to drive into our offices, do remote work and remote school in our parking lots, things like that. I got some data I'll show in a couple of slides that talks about, we did a speed mapping exercise, and it showed that 86% of our residents didn't have access to affordable high-speed internet, and that is basically 10 megabits and above download. And so pretty sparse coverage. Critical infrastructure is not in place. We have very limited fiber on the Southern Ute Indian Tribe Reservation. And so that's part of our project. We have a number of towers in place for oil and gas operations, but they weren't feeding a broadband signal. And so we really started this project even before my time it started off with getting the FCC license grant for the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum. And that has been what's sort of driving our first phase of this project. And I'll go into that here in a minute. This is the crowdsourced speed test mapping project, kind of showing all the red areas, which is really 0 to 10 megabits per second that are scattered around. The green areas are really in and around Ignacio, which is the city government here. and then more up towards, Bayfield or towards Durango. The blue line shows the overall reservation, exterior boundaries of the reservation. Most of what we're focusing on in the first couple phases of our project are the central part of the reservation, which is our highest density areas. But we still have critical needs that we're working to meet on the eastern side and the western side, not only for broadband, but for even cellular coverage, emergency medical service, communications. We just have some big communication gaps in general that we're trying to resolve as we go through this project. This is probably the meat of what I'll dive into, and then I'll show you some information. Actually, the slide deck, I was going to tell you that the slide deck that I've got is one that Delbert, myself, Leah, and a few others worked on it. It's tied in with our public feedback program that's going on right now. We're reaching out both to tribal membership as well as non-tribal residents that live on the reservation, educating them on the project, seeking feedback predominantly on tower locations. Now, with tribal members, we have a lot more focus on where we're putting the fiber, but with the general public, it's really more oriented towards our tower locations and what those towers are going to look like. So phase one. So this was our first phase is deploying a wireless infrastructure, fixed wireless, using that FCC 2.5 gigahertz license. We're constructing 2 new towers, as well as using 4 existing towers to push that 2.5 gigahertz spectrum. And then we're adding 52 miles of middle mile fiber to support those towers. And that infrastructure is only providing up to 50/10 coverage. And that doesn't, jive up with what Kate was saying earlier, the 120. But for us, and for I think a lot of us in rural areas, it's a building block approach. So the state funds that were in House Bill 1289 is really going towards that 52 miles of middle mile fiber. It's a pretty expensive effort putting all that fiber on the reservation. We're having to, I think we're up to about 30% of our project has to be bored right now because of the whole environmental assessment, and a goal to avoid any wetlands, any sort of environmentally sensitive areas. And so that's kind of where our state funds are going into. You can see some of the bullets we put down below it. We saw this as the most expedient way to get high-speed internet out to these living units on the reservation. Our topography and our rural nature makes it difficult to get fiber to every home. So we're starting with a wireless solution to reach as many people as we can. The middle mile fiber is really creating the foundation for our future speed and reliability improvements. And we know that. But we're doing what we can with the funding that we have right now in order to make this happen. Like that last bullet, the state funds are predominantly used for that middle mile fiber. And I can go into a little bit more details here in a minute. I'll just stop and see if Delbert and Leah have anything they wanted to add.
I don't.
All right, thanks, Delbert. So, and then the other components of this, our project, like I said, it's building blocks. Phase one is our fixed wireless with the middle mile. Phase two is what we have put in for our NTIA submission that we haven't received any word on that to date, but basically it's a significant expansion of our middle mile fiber. It's funding middle mile, and there's funding in there for a backbone fiber from the New Mexico border all the way to Pagosa Springs, depending on if we get the money or not. We know that there's limited capacity in our backbone fiber that runs along Highway 160. So we're trying to take some steps to resolve that if we can with the NTIA funds. And then also last mile, we're really targeting high density neighborhoods, certainly not every living unit in the central reservation. It's more these high density neighborhoods. And then what I said earlier, we actually have a third phase, which is trying to get further east and further west within the reservation. It's probably more middle mile. It's probably some microwave backhaul. It's unknown right now. We haven't even put the energy into the engineering needed to push eastern and western regions, but it's something on our radar. And we assume that we're going to solve the eastern and western regions with a kind of a combination of fixed wireless as well as fiber. There is some higher density communities that we could look to get fiber to the home. But again, we got to do that engineering first and see how much it's going to cost. Like I said, this is a public, well, a modified public feedback site, but I'm going to jump through here and just show you some other information. You know, Ed had talked to us about local collaboration. What are we doing? We've done a lot of collaboration, but I wouldn't say it's a very robust. It's more reactive than proactive. It's as topics come up, there's conversations that develop. Probably the most proactive discussions I would say we've had is with La Plata Electric on would it be any easier to go aerial on any of the fiber? Because permitting is a major challenge for us. There's a lot of ownership layers within the reservation and working through all the different layers there, trying to get everything permitted. I will say that we just recently achieved our biological assessment clearance. We got clearance from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. There was a kind of a final step on endangered species protection. Cleared that. We're almost getting through our environmental assessment. There's a stormwater drainage component that we're working through that should be cleared here pretty shortly. And when those get cleared, we're really ready to start putting fiber in the ground. We'll have all of our first 52 miles, except for what we call tribal allotments and a few landowners that we're still negotiating with, but all the permitting will be close to being done. So I'd say collaboration is something like in this meeting. It's something that has to be done. We probably do need to be more proactive and more diligent about that collaboration. But again, it's a pretty intense project, just trying to get all the permitting done and engineering within the reservation itself. So we've kind of been heads down trying to get all that figured out. So at phase one, we're going for the fixed wireless solution. This key, the bullet down there, second from the bottom, avoiding 100% of wetlands, ditches, rivers, driveways. You know, that was a big deal, but it also drove up the cost. And so, you know, that's kind of where we're like with everybody out there, money is the driver, right? So once we get all done with this permitting, we have engineered these fiber lines to do a 100% avoidance of all these ditches and rivers and everything else. So it's been pretty impressive how the engineering teams have worked through all this. We did some education of, you know, kind of where we're funding all this project. The 10 million from the state and House Bill 1289 is really going into the fiber middle mile. The rest of the towers and engineering and you know, other components of the project, permitting. We've had to hire third-party contractors to help with permitting. We're estimating this total project just for phase one to be a $15 million exercise just to get that fixed wireless solution out there. And so we do have a lot of tribal capital invested in this, and we're really counting on the state. We've been working closely with the state to get that 10 million to finish this thing off. And I bet we've spent already today probably $4 to $5 million just getting to where we're at, ready to put, you know, the fiber in the ground. We've been going through and doing what they call potholing, you know, figuring out exact location of all the utilities and We're just about to wrap up the potholing, so I'm feeling really good about where we're at in the process, getting ready to get this fiber in the ground and get out of the engineering and permitting phase and actually start seeing the construction. So Lee, I'm going to stop there. You're the finance expert. What did I miss?
Any comments from the board so far? Okay. All right, Jeffrey, I don't see any comments.
All right. I'm just going to jump through a few slides here. This is a coverage map that we've been working on with Bonfire Engineering. What I'm highlighting here is this, again, is the central part of the reservation. You can see Durango in the upper left, Bayfield in the kind of the upper right, and then Ignacio sitting right in the middle. And the coverage areas are all tied in with the 6 towers that we'll be activating equipment on. And that's how we're going to hit the 50 to, actually this will get an 80% coverage of all the living units once we get these towers fired up. So we'll be able to easily hit the FCC goal of hitting 50% of the living units. But we actually have to hit that, fire up these towers, at least 4 of them, by the end of October next year in order to abide by the FCC requirement. And these are our middle mile fiber tracks. The green is from Three Springs, a community outside of Durango where we have a fiber connection. The blue is for redundancy, it's patching into another fiber connection up on Highway 160. The yellow is pushing eastwardly towards Arbalise, Colorado, hitting some communities over there. And then the purple is hitting a tower called Mesa Mountain Tower that has probably got some of the most visible reaches to all the community. So that's pretty important. And then we're doing a quick microwave shot over to a tower called Sunnyside that's going to feed the Animas River Valley and communities down in there. So again, that's all of our initial fiber work. And this is all in state and county roads. And then we educated the public on our towers. We're only going with 80 footers just because we ran into some, I guess, resistance to taller towers, rightfully so. So we're sticking with 80-foot towers. And we educated the public where they're going. We had some renderings put together what they're going to look like. Taking advantage of oil and gas, existing leases and well sites where we can. We educated the public on our construction techniques, what they're going to see on the side of the road. So almost 70% of our project is plowing, 30% boring, and a little bit of backhoe work. And then we educated the public on our detailed engineering. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of pages of detailed engineering. This is a good slide that we like to use because it has plowing, boring, trenching, boring, plowing. It has everything you're going to see in one segment being worked on here. And so I think that's helping the public realize that we are really engineering this thing down to the foot, trying to minimize, like I said, we're boring under all driveways so that we don't have to go back and repair them, boring through all waterways, watersheds, anything, any environmentally protective areas. We're boring under or over any utilities. So it's pretty extensive work that we've been doing. I won't go too much in our timeline, but the one glaring us in the face is this October of 22 that we want to activate 4 towers in order to meet the FCC 50% coverage deadline. And then the rest of it, we move on to what will allow us to achieve the 100-100 symmetrical. And this all depends on funding. We put in, with the NTIA, a $45 million grant application. We've fully engineered our phase 2, at least to a certain level. and went in with the NTIA to basically add about, I'd say 220 miles of additional middle mile fiber. If we don't get that, it's going to make it hard to really get those 100 speeds, although we are looking at other wireless technology to maybe get more last mile coverage with higher speeds than having the money to go fiber to every home. And that's just something we're going to continue to evaluate, is what are those technologies where we can use wireless and at least get 100. And then this is something, probably the last slide is the green dots. Again, this is the middle of the reservation. The green dots is where we've engineered fiber to the home to non-tribal residents, and the red dots are Southern Ute Indian tribal members. And so that's kind of how we've designed our phase 2 in order to get that fiber to the home footprint. And the yellow is new middle mile fiber that we would be putting in. And that is it. So I went through that pretty fast, but we've been doing a lot of work, as you see, to get us to where we're at right now.
Yep. Thank you, Jeffrey. Any questions from the board of directors? Hearing or seeing none, I'll open up for just a couple questions off the public. Does the public have any questions for Jeffrey? Yeah, Craig.
Great presentation, thank you. Have you seen any supply chain issues or cost issues, since you started the engineering work to now, and has that changed any of your thinking?
Boy, we sure have. We got pretty lucky in that back in May, when we were really zeroing in on this 52 miles of fiber. We actually, our first design had over 70, I think 75 miles of fiber. We talked to the tribal council, and we feared these supply chain issues were coming with fiber, so we pulled the trigger on a purchase. And I think we've got about 70 miles of fiber that it's been delivered, and it's in a storage facility. So we saw that coming and responded. As far as additional supply chain and costs, we did pull the trigger on another order right before the end of the year, because we had concerns over tower steel, the electronic components, the electronic huts, those sort of things. So we went ahead and pre-ordered all that. We've been told that some of the tower steel could take 6 to 9 months lead time, and then we were told that the prices were going up anywhere from 10 to 15%. So we went ahead and pulled the trigger on that. So that's, the tribe's done that investment, and that's why I've been kind of like a woodpecker with Ed, is, hey, where's my money? Hey, where's my money? We're spending this money in advance, but yet the Southern Utes are basically covering things in the interim.
That's great, thank you. And have you had any public-private partnerships with T-Mobile and their EBS, BRS 2.5 gigahertz spectrum holdings?
No, not yet. It's conversations we're starting to have. In fact, we got an initial meeting tomorrow, but it's cellular coverage, it's cellular broadband. It's like, what are our opportunities with, again, the 2 new towers and the 4 existing towers. And we do have a number of other towers, but again, they're in very remote areas used for oil and gas operations. But I want to know what they can and can't do for us, basically.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments? All righty, Ed.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we will get ready to hear from the Mountain Ute Indian tribe. And I am going to be introducing Diane Cruz. Diane is a contractor, and she has been working with them for quite some time, developing plans. Diane is the founder and CEO of NeoConnect Fiber. It's a company that designs middle mile and last mile. And Diane, are you ready to go?
Sure am. Thank you, Ed. Let me get my slide deck up here. It's great to see everybody today. As Ed mentioned, I'm the CEO and tribal broadband consultant. I am with NeoConnect, and we've been working with the tribe on their broadband planning activities for a little bit over a year. We started working with the tribe in putting together and identifying priority project areas that we could then align with potential funding sources that could pay for some of this infrastructure to be built. And so we've had a lot of success stories, and I just have a few slides that I want to share with everyone today. But before I do that, I want to introduce other members of the team that are on the call with me today. Bernadette Cuthair is the Director of Planning and Development with the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. Anthony Bancroft is the Director of IT. Lee Travado is the Director of Public Works. I don't know if Griselda is with us as well, but she represents the White Mesa portion of the tribe in Utah and is the Director of Education. James Clegg has been working with the tribe for several years, and he is a tribal consultant and will also be involved in heading up the tribe's subsidiary, which is UMCE. The subsidiary is going to be an ISP that will be offering services directly to the tribe. They currently are serving many of the government facilities and are currently implementing the wireless programs for the tribe to take advantage of their 2.5 gigahertz spectrum. Also on the call with me is Beverly Santacola. Beverly and I have been furiously writing grants over the past year together, and she's been very instrumental in this process. And Ed has been a very supportive team member as well to help us put together programs that align with the various programs that are offered with the state. Just to give you all a refresher of where this is located. So the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation is located in the Four Corners area of the southwest portion of Colorado. There's also a smaller location in Utah in White Mesa. I will not be talking about what we're doing there, as most of our presentation today is going to be talking about what we're doing in Colorado. But the Ute Mountain Ute Tribal Reservation does consist of two geographical areas. This area in the southwest part of Colorado is located in Toyac, which is south of Cortez and close to Durango and close to the Southern Ute Reservation. And there are approximately 2,000 tribal members that are located on the reservation. All of the households that are located on the reservation are considered priority addresses or households where they receive less than 10 by 1 megabits per second in service. And the pandemic really showed a bright light on how severely lacking in broadband the tribal members and their locations were. Many of the kids that were trying to attend school were doing so from their cars in the school parking lot so that they could obtain some type of access to broadband. But all of the problems that exist within the tribe were further exacerbated after the pandemic or in the last 2 years. We have worked extensively with local stakeholders in the region. The Ute Mountain Ute Tribe participated in several planning initiatives that were supported by the Southwest Colorado Council of Governments. We've been working with CDOT in the region on a number of initiatives that they have. We will be working in coordination with CDOT for many of the middle mile projects that we have been awarded funding. And we're also working with Montezuma County and other regional players to make sure that we're identifying potential needs that other municipalities and local governments may have, as well as other stakeholders in the region. A few success stories, things that we have accomplished within the last year is about a year ago, the tribe applied for and received initial approval from EDA to build a middle mile fiber from Cortez to Toyac. one of the conditions for that EDA grant was to complete the environmental assessment. And so that was completed last spring. We did all of the, engineering and environmental assessment work that needed to take place in order to be awarded that grant. And the grant just received its official award just around the Christmas holiday. And so we're delighted to get the green light on that grant. That grant program will also pay for not only the middle mile fiber from Cortez to Toyac, but it will also pay for the equipment that will be housed at the UMCE offices near the entrance to Toyac. And then that will be a key location to light up other middle mile routes, as well as to support the fiber to the home last mile routes that will be implemented through the DOOR grant. So the tribe also applied for grant funding during the summer of 2021 cycle. And so that was the first cycle that DORA had where they were able to implement their additional $35 million set aside through HB 1289. And so the tribe applied for and was awarded that grant. We are waiting on the contracts for that grant right now, and we'll hopefully begin work on the final design and engineering for fiber to the home in Toyac within the next couple of months. That program will fund fiber to every home and business within Toyac. 100% of the homes and businesses will be covered through that grant program. And then the remaining efforts with the use of the state of Colorado's $10 million will fund the route from Toyac south to the Tribal Visitor Center that's located in the Four Corners region. There's a section of homes that are located in that area that are considered severely unserved in Mancos Creek. And so those will be connected with fiber to the premise. And then there's a new development that is being implemented currently for another 225 homes that are located near the rodeo grounds. And so the state of Colorado set aside will fund the section that is south of Toyac to the tribal center, as well as additional fiber to the home locations. The tribe will also leverage that funding to further facilitate build out of their wireless infrastructure. The tribe currently has a tower at Hermano Peak, and so there's fiber that will be connected to that location, and then grant funding will be used to expand the existing wireless infrastructure that's being implemented currently on the reservation. There's kind of a picture of what this looks like, and they have not done their final design and engineering, so we do not have detailed engineering maps. I'm envious of what the Southern Ute Tribe has in place in terms of their final design. We have only done a high-level desktop design for all of these efforts. And so we've identified the capital costs of each of the priority areas, but we have not done the final design and engineering for any of these programs to be implemented. So that will start as soon as we get contracts in place with the state. So I mentioned the northern section is going to be funded through EDA. EDA funds just middle mile infrastructure, and so we will be funding fiber to be built to the entrance of Toyac. And then the DORA program will build out to the 500 plus homes and businesses within Toyac with fiber to the home. And then the state set aside will build the southern route to the areas near Mancos Creek, the tribal center, tribal visitor center, as well as the rodeo grounds, which are located just south of the entrance to Toyac. Our vision and strategy all along has been to work with key stakeholders in the area and to not only build out middle mile and last mile infrastructure for the tribe, but to be a key player in the whole Southwest Colorado region. That part of the state has really suffered from the impact of not having existing fiber infrastructure in place. There's very limited infrastructure in the whole southwest portion of the state. And so our strategy is to not only meet the needs of the tribe, but also the region as a whole. And ultimately, what we would like to do is further leverage funding through NTIA and through the additional set aside in the Jobs Act to complete the connectivity to Tiknos Pass and Shiprock and Albuquerque, and to put in place alternative routes to Denver. But first things first, we wanted to just get them access to Cortez, and we'll be most likely using the existing co-location facility there to get internet connectivity and internet supply. And then ultimately, we would like to participate in connecting the entire region to other key internet hubs in Albuquerque and Denver. Our strategy and vision has been to try to leverage as many funding programs as possible. And thankfully, the programs that we've talked about have already received funding. We again hope to leverage the NTIA program to further build out in the region. So with that, I can turn it over for any questions that you all might have.
Are there any questions for Diane from the board of directors? Not seeing any. How about the public? Do we have any questions for Diane? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Diane. Nice seeing you again. Happy New Year.
Same to you. Thank you.
All right, Ed, anything else?
Nope. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. Thank you, Diane.
No problem. Thank you, both of our presenters. Appreciate it. So it's good insight, good progress. Once everyone has access, it'll be exciting, right? Thank you again, Ed, for bringing this to us today. We appreciate that. And Sarah, do we have any other business we need to discuss today?
Nope, that's it.
Well, I think your overestimation of 2+ hours is actually gave back 30 minutes, 35 minutes. So good job, everybody. I appreciate it. If there's no other comments from the board of directors, we'll go ahead and conclude today's meeting. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you in 2 months. Right, Sarah? All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Take care.